So, letting go. It's been something I've been interested in all my life, really, in one way or another. And the ideas have been developing over the years. I suppose it started when I first got interested in meditation, which was TM, Transcendental Meditation, where the remarkable thing that Maharishi was saying, in sort of contrary to what every other teacher I'd met was saying, is that meditation should be easy, it should be effortlessness, and it's sort of just letting go of thoughts. It's not focusing the attention, it's relaxing. Whereas so many other teachings I've been following were talking about concentration, and you had to really focus the mind. And if you did this for years, then you might finally reach liberation or something. And his approach was so refreshing. And that was sort of my first sort of introduction to the theme of letting go. And I just found it coming up again and again in my life. I got a lot from the Course in Miracles at one stage, and that's really, as I see it, about letting go of the ego's way of thinking and sort of coming back. It puts it more in Christian terms, but coming back to ourself and our own inner wisdom. And also, later I got involved in, not very deeply involved, but I did quite a lot of Buddhist retreats, not Tibetan, but more sort of spirit rock type. And there again, letting go comes up in Buddhism again and again and again. In fact, it was one of the key ideas that Buddha saw, was that we suffer because we get attached to our ideas of how things should be, what we want, etc. And so letting go of attachment was basically the way to end suffering and become liberated. So it's been there all my life. And I started writing this book actually years ago, but I clearly wasn't ready to. And I tried another couple of times, and it just wasn't happening. Wasn't going very well. And then I suddenly realized, just at the beginning of COVID, just before COVID struck, I realized, I know how to do this book. I want to do it as a series of very short little pieces, each of which sort of stands on their own and has its own sort of message. And I love doing that. I love writing short pieces where you can really work on them and sculpt them and make them into something. And so I thought, great. And I had January, February free, and I thought, good, I can start this book. And of course, come March, it's like, you're not going anywhere for a while, honey. So I had, the first 6-9 months of COVID free to just work on the book. And it's been going fairly nicely. So, yeah, letting go is really a theme which is in not just Buddhism and the other things I mentioned, but almost every spiritual tradition. It's there in one way or another, whether it's talking about surrender, letting go of ego. Forgiveness is really about letting go, or devotion, letting go of one's own needs, etc. So it comes up again and again and again. And almost universally, the reason it comes up is they say that holding on, our attachments, whatever it is, actually leads to suffering. It doesn't make us happy. And that letting go, when we let go, then we can actually taste the liberation, the happiness that we're looking for. And it's there's a sort of irony here, because if we look behind while we're holding on to something, we're holding on to some judgment, some attachment, something we want, some feeling. If you look at it, behind the holding on is often this idea that if I just got this or stopped this happening, whatever it is, I'd be happier. That's what's behind the holding on. Ultimately, is we hold on to something, some idea, whatever, because we think it'll make us happy, or life will be better in some way or another. And the irony is that it's the opposite. The holding on just makes us tense, unhappy, suffering more. It takes us away from what we're actually really looking for. And that's why I sort of see letting go as not something we do so much, because I think a lot of the time we're thinking, how do I let go of what I'm holding on to? And we think we're sort of holding on to things. I mean, that's where it starts. And so one of the ideas that I think misinterpretations of letting go is about renunciation. If I'm holding on to my attachment to, money, I need to give up all material things, become poor. Or if I'm, holding on to relationships or something, I need to become celibate or whatever it is. And that's sort of the old idea is you need to change things, you need to change your life. But it isn't that at all. It's about an inner change. And it's not even really about changing our emotions or thoughts. It's something much deeper, because behind any of our attachments is this thing that said, it's that I feel if I hold on, I'm going to feel better. There's some sort of mindset, belief system behind our holding on, behind our attachments. And that's what we're really letting go of, is the mindset, the belief system, our way of seeing things. So we're not letting go of the things themselves so much as how we see them. And that's why one of the meanings of the title of my book is letting go of nothing. It's letting go of no thing. We're not letting go of the things, but we're letting go of the way we see them, which isn't actually a thing in itself. So that's one of the meanings of letting go of nothing. We're not letting go of things, but we're letting go of the mindset, our attachment to how we see them. And I said, we often think letting go we think it's hard to do. People say, I tried to let go, I just couldn't do it. And I think that's because we're already doing too much. We're doing the holding on. And so I see letting go as it's a relaxing of the mind. Rather than trying to change something or do something, it's actually stopping doing and allowing the mind to relax. And again, what we tend to do if we've got some, say, difficult emotion feeling, because it's uncomfortable, we tend to push it away. We tend to push it to the back of our mind where we think it won't bother us, or we numb ourselves to it, or we think about something else. So our sort of common, almost habitual response when there's something that's disturbing us, we feel we want to let go of, we try to push it away, get rid of it. But I think we all know that doesn't really work in the long term, because it's sitting there in the back of our mind somewhere. I think it was Jung who said, what you resist persists. It means what we don't let into our consciousness keeps there, keeps sort of nagging at us in the background. So that's led me over the years to come to a different approach, which I call letting in and letting be. So I reframe letting go as letting in and letting be. Lots of people have talked about letting go as letting be, including the Beatles, of course. But often what they see there is letting the situation be. Like if there's something going on that's disturbing you, it's like, oh, just let it be. Don't worry about it. So that's what it normally means by letting be, is just don't worry about it. Leave it there. Yeah. My approach to letting be is almost the opposite. It's about, if you're worrying about it, letting that in, letting the experience, letting the feelings in. And so I see the first step is letting in, which is allowing yourself to notice what is happening. So if you've got say, you're upset at somebody over something they did or something, is just to notice, coming to the body first of all. I think the body, we tend to always go, not always, but often go to our head to solve it. Come to the body and say, okay, what's actually going on here in the body? What am I noticing? What sensations are there? To actually let the actual body feelings in. And it's interesting, with an emotion, we use the word feeling both for a body sensation and for the emotion. I'm feeling angry, whatever. So it's about opening up, letting in what's going on in the body, noticing that, and allowing it to be there, not trying to change it, just saying, okay, this is what's going on. This is what I'm noticing, allowing it to be there. And as we do that, we tend to soften the resistance. Often we resist experiencing it, but by letting it in, we're allowing the resistance to soften. And we'll often find the actual sort of, the feeling itself begins to soften as well. And the other side of any emotion is there's always a story to it. There's something we're telling ourselves, what this person did, whatever. And we can apply the same principle there, just letting in the story. What am I telling myself about that person? What do they do wrong? And as we do that, what often happens is there can be a loosening of our attachment to it. It's like, yes, well, what were they thinking? What was on their mind? Did they have a bad night? Whatever it is, what's going on with them? Instead of just saying this person is blah, 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 we can begin to put ourselves in their shoes. So that's how I approach letting go in many different areas. It's this principle of allowing in, letting be, which is really, as I see it, creating the right mental conditions, you could say, in which the letting go can begin to happen of its own accord. As I say, we don't do the letting go, but we can create the mental environment, if you like, whereby we can begin to relax and allow the letting go to happen. And I've been talking about here as emotions, but I apply that to many other areas in the book. And one of the things I thought I'd focus on more today is, I suppose, what comes up in many traditions is letting go of ego. And that's probably one of the fundamental things that comes up in spiritual traditions is ego and how we need to let go of ego. And again, that often becomes like the ego is some enemy. We've got to conquer it. We've got to transcend it. We've got to, whatever it is, get rid of it. I don't see the ego. Well, first of all, I don't see the ego as something. We use a noun for ego. There's something called ego. If I look inside myself, I don't find a part of me called ego. I don't find some separate self that sort of comes in and starts taking over. I don't find something called an ego. What I do find is, well, first of all, that sense of self, beingness that I've talked about in other sessions, that deep sense of presence, of I, that's always there, that sort of the transcendent self, it's sometimes called, or just the pure being awareness. And along with that, I find lots of egocentric thoughts, which I get caught up in. And that's where what we call the ego is. It's a thought, it's a way of thinking about the world, which generally is about how we can get what we want, how we can be safe, how we can be secure, what's going to make us happy, how to avoid danger, etc. And in some respects, it's a very natural, useful way of thinking. If there's some physical danger or something, it's really important that we look after ourselves, look after our well-being, keep ourselves safe. So in that respect, this way of thinking is not an enemy to get rid of. It's an ally. It's something there that is trying to help us, really. The problem is that it gets triggered in most of our lives where there's no actual physical danger or need, but it gets triggered over something we imagine might happen or something we want or don't want, or whatever. And it comes in. Once it gets triggered, it's there and it takes us over. We get caught up in that way of thinking. But I say it's a way of thinking. I like to actually use the verb rather than noun and say not so much my ego is doing something, but I am egoing, my way of thinking. I am egoing in that moment. And if we look at ego that way as a process, a mental process we get caught in, a thought system we get caught in, then letting go of ego isn't about getting rid of it or whatever. It's about letting go of that thought system in the moment. And so when we notice it, a lot of the time we're caught up in it, we don't notice it because it's taking us over and we get caught up in what it's insisting that we do. We must speak to this person about whatever it is. But when we recognize it, then we can have the choice just to pause it for the moment. As some of you know, I'm a great fan of pausing whenever we notice, we're caught up in something, just to pause the thinking. And that's somewhere where I think, we do have choice. We can just pause our thinking. And when we do, we're in a sense stepping out of the ego in that moment. And what I notice when I do this, when I just pause, is really two things. One, the present begins to reveal itself again. I noticed I was totally caught up in this egoic way of thinking, and I pause. It's like, there's the sound of the raindrops again. And there's the sound, the sound of that fan. I notice the present moment, it begins to reveal itself again. But also, I think more importantly is I come back, it's like, there's always a sense of a sense of relief, a sense of coming home. And that's what all the traditions are talking about in a way. When we do step out of the ego, we come back to the present, being here now, as Ram Dass put it beautifully, and we start coming back to closer to ourselves, to our true nature, coming back to that quality of ease and relief in ourselves. So I see letting go of ego as a process we can be doing all our life, and maybe it never ends, but just catching it. And as we do, I think the motivation to do so builds, because each time we do, it's like that sense of relief, here I am, begins to build up, and we get the sense of, yes, I should remember to do this because it really helps. And something else I want to say about ego before we pause is, and I haven't actually written about this yet, so I was going to write about it before I finished the book, but I never did. If you see ego as a mindset we get caught in, then all these different ways of thinking each have their own sort of shade. I was going to write a section called 50 Shades of Ego. And what I mean by this is, if your mindset that you're caught in, that you want to let go of, if the mindset is something to do with, well, say what I was talking about, being upset at somebody. If you look at that way of thinking when you're upset at something, there's a sort of felt sense to it inside, not just how it feels in the body, but there's a felt sense in the mind of how that way of thinking feels. It's hard to describe, but I think if you explore that in yourself, I know it. When I started noticing this a few years ago, it became fascinating to explore how a particular thought system, a particular way of thinking, had its own sort of felt sense. And if another way of egoic thinking was about the something I must have or something I must do, completely different thing. And when I tuned into that, there was another sort of felt sense to the ego, into the ego mind. And I've just found that fascinating, that when I do notice I'm caught in it, which I'm going to say is a lot of the time it happens. I'm no perfect enlightened human being. I'm just somebody on my own journey practicing. But when I notice not only, what's going on in my body, but, what's going on in the head as well. But when I notice, how does it actually feel? It allows me again to allow in more that particular shade of egoing that's happening at that time. And one of the things is there's always some slight sense of tension with it. A felt sense in the mind, not just in the body, but a felt sense in the mind of tension. And this, I see, as really the hallmark of egoing, is there's some slight sense of tension. And that's a good way to sort of spot when we're possibly caught up in this way. It's like, if I notice there's some background sense of tension in my mind, it's like, okay, let me look, maybe I'm caught in something here. Or another way is a sense of insistence, which is also part of the tension. But the ego mind, its job is to keep us safe, and it needs to be insistent. You need to do this or not do this. And when there's that sense of insistence, like, don't look at it another way, this is what you've got to do. When I notice that sense of insistence, that's always a good sign that, hang on, I'm probably getting caught in a certain mindset here, a certain way of seeing. So that's what I just want to talk about briefly, is seeing ego not as something, but seeing it as a way of thinking we get caught in from time to time, or maybe quite a lot of the time. But seeing it as a thought system, as a way of thinking, it's much easier to be practicing. We can step out of it. We can let go of ego 100 times a day, 1,000 times a day, whatever. But it's a practice we can continually be doing, rather than some goal we're striving to achieve. So time is going on. What I always like to do is just have a short short meditation, just to really take some of what I've been talking about inside into practice in ourselves. Won't be long, but maybe just 5 minutes. I'll ring a bell to finish, and then we'll open it up for questions, discussions, see what people want to explore. So I like to just switch off my video while I'm doing this. It just allows me to be more sort of internal in myself as I settle in. So I suggest just, if you want to just close your eyes, you don't have to, but just close your eyes, I suggest, and just take a few deeper breaths, just relaxing. The key to all of this really is about relaxing. Just letting the body relax. As you breathe out, just let the body relax, let the weight go. And just noticing your experience in the moment, whether it's sensations in the body, the rising and falling of the chest as you breathe, sounds around you, little thoughts popping in and out, feelings that might be there, but not focusing on anything in particular. In this sort of practice, we're sort of just letting our awareness soften. And often our awareness is focused in on something, zoomed in on something that we're interested in or focusing on. I think of this practice more as the opposite of zooming out, and just not focusing on something, but just zooming out and having a more open awareness of just allowing everything to just be as it is for the moment. Nowhere we're trying to get to, nothing we're trying to do so much. It's just opening our awareness to what is. And you'll notice from time to time, we get interested in some thought, the attention gets caught up in some little thoughts crept in. And when you notice that, as in most techniques of meditation, we just come back to being present. What I'd like to suggest is also just noticing probably how that thought is in some way, some reflection of egoic thinking, my life or the world or whatever it is would be a better place if I followed this thought through. But we're just letting it go for now. And noticing if any faint tension has crept in with it. And then just, if so, just letting the attention relax again. Just letting it become soft. So as we do, we just drop back towards ourself again. And as we do, just noticing any sense of ease or relief that comes as we just let go of that holding on. So just letting go of any expectation, any goal, letting go of anything to do. And just noticing how it feels to let the mind relax and just be here in this moment. And I also like to suggest to people in this just to allow an inner smile to be there. It's just a way of saying to ourselves, it's okay, this is nice. A sort of recognition just how it feels when we begin to let go. And just continue for another minute or so like this. And as I said before, just don't rush out of meditate. It's always good just to gently, slowly come out. So just maybe just open the eyes a little bit if you had them closed, let a little light in. We gently return to just being here together.